So far, we've just sort of assumed that growth is something that we intuitively understand and is a number which something grows by. However, we need to sort of address this. Because the question is really, which growth are we talking about here? And we can see this in two basic ways. We can see growth as sort of the net investments, right? In the invested capital that we have. So this would be sort of growth of invested capital. The alternative that we could do here, or we could look at, is in the perspective of our annuities, right? So we have this annuity, which essentially is the sum of expected cash flows, where we have an assumption of the growth rate, or it's basically a growth in the cash flows of the firm over time period T. So this would be then a growth in cash flows. And essentially these two are two candidates or perspectives. So looking at this in terms of the free cash flow, which consists of basically our earnings minus our net investment, so sales minus costs minus the tax man is essentially what earnings represent, right? Now, if we look at this, sales here to some extent is not decided by us, right? So it's basically exogenous, meaning it is something that we are not in control of. Costs, on the other hand, are endogenous. Which means we do control costs to some extent. Obviously, there is a limit to how much we can be frugal, but if we're frivolous or if we're overspending, we are in control of that. In terms of net investment, sure, endogenous. We decide how much we want to reinvest in our company. And then the final one here, the tax rate, yeah, that's exogenous, decided basically by the taxman. So to some extent here, it isn't clear cut in terms of the cash flows and how they grow and how they are, but to some extent we need to understand that there is a balance here. We do decide on the growth in terms of our investments. We do not decide on the sales, we do decide on the cost, we do not decide on the tax rate. So all in all here, we have to make assumptions on how much we sell. We have to make decisions on the endogenous of the costs. And as such, there's a balance here. We need to balance our investments towards what we assume in terms of sales. So this is a little bit like this guy. It's the chicken or the egg. Now, if your business looks something like this, it seems that sales is not going to be the problem. You have basically unlimited sales available to you, so the growth is going to be limited by your investments. On the other hand, it does not help if you want to invest as much as possible if your sales look like this. You didn't decide to have no customers. However, if you don't have any customers, we can't assume growth by growing the assets. So what's my point here? This guy needs to buy another truck if he wants to grow his business. So what's my point? Well, growth without reinvestment is an economic fallacy. So what does that mean? Well, as you saw with the guy with the truck, there's no way that you can assume that that business grows without him actually reinvesting in another truck. And as such, we can also go the other way and say that investments may not always lead to growth.